All right, well, we got a bunch of people rolling in, and just want to take this time just to kind of let you guys know that if you do have any questions during this webinar, please either you can use the Q&A. I think there's a chat too, if I'm not mistaken. Just make sure that if it's possible that you set your chat to everybody. That way everybody can see what you're saying. If that is an option for you. I'm not sure if it is or not with webinars, but we are here to talk about the elusive Microsoft Secure Score. My name is Benjamin Jones. I am the Director of Managed SaaS Alerts, and I am joined by Jason Shivik and Enrique. Uh, you have to say your last name for me, Enrique.
I,
Resendez?
I send this. You're perfect. Spot
Resendez.
on.
Awesome. I've been practicing my
Yeah,
Spanish.
you're doing good.
Well, thank you. Well, Jason, would you mind introducing yourself to everybody?
Yeah, sure. I'm the senior Microsoft software developer here at SaaS Alerts. I'm responsible for Fortify and all the backend logic that goes along with Fortify.
Excellent. And Enrique, you're up, sir.
My turn. Good afternoon,
Yeah.
everyone. Pleasure to be here with you guys. Thank you for the invite. I'm Enrique Resendez, CEO and founder of One MSP. We focus on small to medium businesses, primarily managed cybersecurity services, trying to make our customers safer every day.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, and we are going to keep things very informal here. We're just going to answer some questions and just kind of run through this little slide deck. But if you guys do have anything, please don't hesitate to jump in. So what we're going to be covering today is what is this Microsoft Secure Score? How can you improve it? And how can Fortify help you do that? And there's a couple of things that we'll run into. And let's see here. So first, we have to start with our why statement. And Jason, would you like to read that? I don't think I've ever heard you read our why statement.
Sure. There is a transition underway in cybersecurity from an on-premise and device-centric focus to a user behavior and account-centric approach. And SaaS Alerts helps MSPs win on this transition.
Nice. Very nice. Excellent. Thank you. So, what is Microsoft Secure Score? And I'll start with this, and Jason, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. But basically, the way that I look at it is a way for Microsoft to measure, what controls and what security measures you're putting in place to secure your tenant. Uh, I do know that this is sometimes a kind of a moving target as well. Jason, what's your experience when it comes to with the Secure Score?
Um, well, my opinion is they're looking at all the key areas in identity, which is basically where you get your most points from. You do get a handful of points through anti-spam, anti-phishing policies, and they're weighting each of those areas with some unknown algorithm in the back end, which determines how many points you get for each remediation. But they do change slightly over time, and they do add additional recommended actions throughout the year.
Hmm. Nice. That sounds like a fun task to keep up with too. Uh, I guess that's and that'll bring me to a question for you, Enrique. Uh, how are you keeping up with all the changes that Microsoft throws out when it comes to this score?
Well, I think that's a very complicated matter to keep up with. If we don't use tools and technology like we have in Fortify with SaaS Alerts,
Mhm.
which simplifies our life and allows us to kind of go in and see what each of our tenants requires, what they're missing, how we can improve their secure score to be able to get them in a better secure posture. So basically, we rely on Fortify from you guys to keep us up to date and progressing as things come out and new policies are in place.
Yeah, I
Excellent.
don't think many people take the time to go through and look at the secure score, look at the history of your secure score over time, especially as you add new features and licenses into your environment, add users, which is really important because every time you add a license, say for Teams or SharePoint, now you're opening yourself up to another set of potential security threats that need to be remediated or should be remediated.
Yeah, I've noticed that when you start out with like this free version of Azure, that your secure score, the things that you're applying, they have like a huge significance. Like it's 20% increase, a 30% increase. But then as you add more packages, you increase yourself up to like 365 premium. All of a sudden, those controls, those same ones, they matter less.
Correct, they do. Depending, especially what if you subscribe to Defender Online Protection, a lot of those recommended actions in that area are weighted very high. Anti-spam, anti-malware policies, some of those are weighted combined higher than conditional access policies.
Hmm.
For instance, like our policy collections for anti-spam, which aggregate anywhere between 5 to 12 Microsoft recommended actions into a single Fortify recommended action that you can rectify with a single click.
It's very nice. Well, and that brings me to our why it's important. I think we kind of covered a lot of this. So it really just kind of shows you how, how does your security stand with your environment. We've also seen occasions where, sometimes cyber insurance will want to see this score as well and to see what you're doing with it, to kind of see where you align with different compliances. We've also see that with CIS and NIST, they actually make direct references to some of these controls too, don't they, Jason?
They do. There are quite a few of the Microsoft recommended actions that do align directly with CIS benchmarks for Azure and Office 365 foundations. And then we also have what we call our own custom Fortify recommended actions, which are outside of the list of recommended actions that you would see in Microsoft Security Center. You don't gain any points for applying those, but Microsoft doesn't list, because Microsoft doesn't list those specific remediations in their security center, but they do exist inside the Azure Foundations or Office 365 benchmarks for CIS.
Okay. So you may not get points for them, but they still do matter, huh?
They do.
Excellent. Well, and Eureka, I have a question for you. Before Fortify, what did you do as an MSP to kind of answer the question of the secure score? Did you pay much attention to it or?
Well, we paid attention to it because multiple tools we have out there provide you this secure score from Microsoft. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, we would just see it. It was, I'm not going to say in Mandarin to try to decipher it, but in order to go manually and find all these policies, uh, pretty much we work day to day with conditional access policies, but outside of that, all these configurations you could do with the settings we have inside Fortify, it would take you too much time. We do have a managed tool we use to kind of manage 365 environments, and they've added a lot of functionality into it, but still, it's not as easy and simplified to use. So we were aware of the score, not much action we could take around it to improve it.
Yeah. I've been exactly in your shoes. It's, a smaller MSP. And when you're talking about, just yourself, that's one thing. But then you have, 20 or 30 or 40 other customers and you're going, oh, this is just going to consume the next good part of my life.
Yes.
I've noticed that, Microsoft's not always great about telling you, where to go and to change these settings. And when they do, it's sometimes they'll change where the location is, neglect to inform you.
And they
Um,
lack the detailed information we get with SaaS Alerts little light bulb, which
mhm.
I call it the light bulb. It gives you great insight to kind of know what you're modifying, how it could affect, and kind of reanalyze or rethink before you push something out.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We do have a user impact. I love that feature. Jason. I don't know if that was you that came up with that, but that does. I love how it breaks it down into kind of plain English and says this is what your end users can expect and to see.
Yeah, not all of our recommended actions will have a user impact because some are fairly benign, so they won't impact the users directly or noticeably. But there are definitely quite a few recommended actions out there that could have potentially adverse effects when you go to apply it to your organization. Not necessarily adverse, but it could change user behavior. So it's good to be aware of that before you go ahead and implement those recommended actions. One of the good features that we have with the ability to apply and remediate these recommended actions is if something does happen, and it is causing an issue with your organization or customer, we do have the ability to just undo that recommended action. So it'll reverse whatever was taken to remediate it.
Oh, very nice. Yes, that's
It,
very true.
it's also helpful, and when, not that this happens very frequent to us, but when you kind of have a little boo-boo and then trip along the road. Last night we modified some policies for a new customer. They did not tell us they were using legacy authentication and SMTP authentication. So we turned on the policy. So we get a call this morning asking something happened. We obviously knew exactly where it was, but with the little detail they gave us and going into Entra and being able to pull the logs and seeing it was failing on basically unconditional access policies and the description we get from SaaS Alerts, we were able to remediate that pretty quickly and get them back up and running.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, there are a couple of controls that we do have that are recommended by CIS and other frameworks that are a little bit more dangerous than others. So it's always good to read those descriptions. But in the event that something does happen, yeah, that undo is a big lifesaver. So let's talk about how we can improve that score. And I know we've kind of talked about that a little bit as far as using Fortify. And one other thing that we have really found to be super beneficial is just the what we call the alternative mitigation in Microsoft. And we were talking about that a little bit before the meeting on basically just answering Microsoft's questions. If you're using a third-party spam filter or third-party malware prevention, a lot of the times that already takes care of the things that Microsoft is wanting you to address. But they just don't know it. They don't know what you're using, so they think that you're doing nothing. Uh, Jason, is there anything else that you've seen that really help MSPs improve that score beyond the alternative mitigation?
Off the top of my head, I think just ensuring that you evaluate all the recommended actions that are available to your Azure tenant, and going through each one and either applying it or making the conscious decision to say this is a risk accepted because you know
Mm,
you have something in place that you can't apply the remediation or an alternative mitigation. Now, if you do select risk accepted, you won't gain any points for that action.
okay.
Only if you select alternative mitigation, like you said, you have an alternate solution in place, or you're using a Duo MFA versus for the, let's say for the phishing resistant MFA requirement, and you're using FIDO keys, but you're using a third party for that, then you can go in and apply alternate mitigation on those Microsoft recommended actions and gain the full points for those.
Excellent. And how does, I guess I got two questions for you. One, does Fortify let Microsoft know about these things? And the follow-up question to that is, how does Microsoft know that you're actually doing what you're saying?
Yeah, good.
No, that was my question. The second one, how do they know exactly if you're doing it or not?
Yeah.
Well, so if you're saying alternative mitigation, so Microsoft does do scans of their recommended actions every night to ensure that the recommended settings are in place that meet their criteria before they award the points. Now, this either happens nightly on some of the higher, the more points recommended actions, like your conditional access policies, those will get scanned on a nightly basis. There are settings out there that I've seen that don't get scanned for a week, 2 weeks, because they're lower priority recommended actions. But when you do say alternative mitigation, Microsoft has no way of knowing or scanning for that. So they're 100% relying on you to be trustworthy in saying that this is remediated by a third party solution.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of the honor system with them, huh?
Yeah, so and that's good to note with the Microsoft scans checking for compliance on these recommended actions that they might not occur immediately. So if you do apply a recommended action, you may not see the immediate gain in the points for that recommended action. It could take a day, it could take a week. you'll see in our UI that when you apply it, the recommended action will go to ongoing until you receive full points to it, and then it'll be moved into the completed column.
Well, how long does it take for our system to apply those things?
Those will happen in seconds as soon
Okay,
as you go ahead and apply the remediate action. And that's regardless if you're applying it to one organization or 100 organizations.
very cool. And I guess I have one question for you. So, what happens if I do apply something and somebody makes a change and now it's not really effective? Do I lose the points? Do I have to reapply it? What do we do with that?
So let's say you implement a policy.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not going to get specific about the policy type, but someone goes in and manually modifies that policy, and maybe disables a setting in that policy that Microsoft is looking for. When that policy gets pre-scanned and Microsoft sees that the setting no longer meets their requirements, you're going to actually lose points. So you can get partial points for certain recommended actions. Let's say a recommended action is worth 10 points, and you might only achieve 8.5 points if not all the recommended settings are in place. Let's say you had 10 points and you change the setting to a less secure setting. Microsoft will deduct points from your policy. In our UI, then you'll see a tag show up on that recommended action as regressed, and it will move back into the open column, at which case you'll see that you lost points for a change made to that policy. And if you want to true that policy back up, you can just go ahead and reapply
Hmm.
that regressed action, and it will fix any of the incorrect settings in that policy.
No, okay. So you just reapply it and you're good to go.
That's it.
Cool. Well, that's awesome. Well, let's see here. So I guess my next question would be to Enrique. Do you guys, as an MSP, do you monitor for those regressions, and do you reapply them as soon as something like that happens, or do you do investigating to find out, why is this no longer being effective?
So we don't do it on a live basis.
Hmm.
We'll a couple of times a month go in and kind of review. And that was one of the questions I had right now for Jason. When you get a policy that gives you some sort of error that it couldn't be applied, or some policies we've seen for all user MFA to be required with conditional access policy, it'll stay there for ongoing for a long time. Is there a reason they'll stay on ongoing? But going back to your question, Ben, it is a chore to kind of be monitoring this, but we kind of base on the score. If we see a variation on the score, then we kind of know something's going on. That's our easy graphical view of it.
So the reason you'll see an action sit in the ongoing column for a long time is you haven't achieved full points for it yet. Either you haven't achieved any points for it yet because Microsoft has not scanned it, like I said, which could take a week or two for some of the lower priority recommended actions before they'll award your points. Or, for instance, you'll get partial points for an action. And a good example of that would be require MFA for all users in your organization. So you'll apply that one and you'll see that one continually sit in ongoing because you haven't achieved all the points for it. And the reason for that is until Microsoft sees every user account in your tenant have registered for MFA, they won't award you full points. It'll always be partial points. So, and you'll see that in the implementation status inside the UI, it'll say 15 out of 20 users haven't registered for MFA yet. So until those 15 users actually log in and register for MFA, then you won't be awarded full points.
Is there a way to kind of, yes, I have seen the feature where it tells you the amount of users that I figured it was registered. What happens if you have temporary users that don't log in that frequently, or like accountants that might work towards the end of the year, and they weren't just, if they're disabled, do you still get dinged for them not registering the MFA yet?
If the account's disabled, you won't get dinged, but if it's an active enabled account, then you will.
Okay, so
So
you
you'll
give you an
often
option.
see that you could be compliant in that policy, and if you add additional user accounts, you'll often see that policy become regressed because it sees new accounts that were created that haven't been registered with MFA yet.
Okay, thanks.
Well, and along the same lines as MFA, say I do have an account that can't have MFA enabled on it. Is there anything I can do within SaaS Alerts to say, you know what, I accept that this maybe it's an old legacy like VoIP phone or something, and it doesn't support MFA. What can I do within our platform to kind of exclude that?
So some of our recommended actions, depending on the recommended action, support parameters. So when you go ahead and configure or apply the remediation for that specific policy, you can set to exclude specific users from the requirement of MFA for all users. And that would be the best way to account for user accounts that can't be supported with multi-factor authentication.
Interesting. I don't get the full points though, just for since I'll have that exclusion though, I assume.
Do not know. Microsoft only considers full points if you have 100% coverage.
I have a couple of questions. I got one from Mr. Anthony Drager. He says, why don't all the recommended actions allow for granularity?
Well, not every recommended action has the ability to configure parameters for it. Either they're not supported or there's just no additional settings that you can choose. And if there's settings that would make the remediation less secure, we don't put them in there as a parameter.
Okay, very nice. Well, that's cool. Let's see. Let's take a quick look at SaaS Alerts. So, this slide basically wants us to talk about other things besides Fortify too, all the other things that SaaS Alerts provide you above and beyond Fortify. As a sales engineer, when I was doing that role, I found that a couple of MSPs really only came to us because of Fortify alone, didn't have any idea about any of the other features that we provide, both with the monitoring of your M365 Azure logs, as well as the ability to respond to any of those events, all done through automation, and our reporting module as well. Enrique, what is your favorite part of SaaS Alerts? Is it Fortify or is it something else?
It is Respond.
Respond. Okay.
Respond. It's the only tool we have in our tool stack, like I always say, that can respond to say we got a bad actor stopped. We cannot prevent a bad actor from coming in because that depends on the end users and their ability to detect phishing sites or any malicious places. Their credentials could be stolen. But with Respond, there's no guarantee in life, but I think it's our highest percentage of a guarantee to say it will be detected and we automatically block the user, drop the tokens, and change the password. So I think that is my by far favorite part of SaaS Alerts.
Very cool. Well, and this is a question I'm also asked. As like, and I would love to know what your opinion is. So if someone came to me and said, you know what, I'm putting your platform in, do I really need to pay for the extra license for conditional access? What are your thoughts on that?
There's no option for it. That is a must. There's just so many things, and we love P2, unfortunately, for risky behaviors and other things, which
Mhm.
sometimes gets you more in trouble with users being blocked in valid scenarios than it isn't. But conditional access is a must. There's no way in today's environment you could live without conditional access. Now you got to do best practices around it and apply these policies, start working with trusted locations and things like that to further enhance your MFA.
Yeah, in the case of like a mixed license environment, like I saw brought up in the question there.
Mhm.
So when we create the policies, the conditional access policies, by default, we include all users to that policy unless you explicitly configure and include or exclude via the policy parameters prior to applying it. Obviously, if the user is not licensed for that functionality, that conditional access policy is not going to apply to them, in which case Microsoft is going to look to see if you have per user MFA enabled for those accounts inside the Entra tenant. Unfortunately, we can't automate for the basic Azure AD licenses. enabling per user MFA because it's a legacy setting and it's not something that's available in the Microsoft APIs. But they will look to see if those users do have per user MFA and enforce MFA enabled and enforced, because that will also count towards completing and receiving the full points for that action.
Well, and that's a great question. So, as far as that's concerned, how are you what do you think about like security defaults as well and how that's applied? Is it better to have those on and just kind of forget about whatever's going on and let Microsoft do their thing, or more so conditional access policy?
Well, conditional access policies by far are more secure if you're licensed for them. Obviously, if you're in an Azure AD basic tenant, then enabling security defaults is the recommendation. And if you do go to try and apply some of our conditional access policies for Microsoft, they have two remediation paths. Either create the conditional access policy if you're Azure P1 or above, or enable security defaults. So actions like enable MFA for administrators and users. If you're in that basic license tier, it will enable security defaults if it's not already enabled. If you have the P1 or above license, it's going to disable security defaults because they have to be disabled in order to create the conditional access policies. So we go ahead and automatically disable security defaults and create the
Oh, cool.
conditional access policy. So certain actions will pivot like that based on Microsoft's remediation steps for that action.
Is there some preview for an Entra for per user MFA enablement outside of the 365 Admin Center, or was I dreaming?
Um, no, I mean, you can enable per user MFA. If you're in the Azure portal, that's what I work with more frequently, that you'll see a per user MFA setting button up on top of the user's page there. So Microsoft actually recommends you disable per user MFA for every user and go ahead and use conditional access policies instead. Just like they recommend disabling security defaults and enabling conditional access policies.
I've heard that they were going to be phasing out the legacy MFA. Is that something that's on the roadmap that you've heard about?
I have heard that, though I haven't heard of any specific dates.
Okay.
They are enforcing MFA as of October for all the admin portals now.
Well, and there's something coming up in February or April.
Hmm.
There's some other changes I
Yeah,
saw.
I heard they went from the security defaults. It was more of like encouraging you to have MFA, but not really requiring it for every part of M365. But now they're doing that with the admins, and I think the future was to do it with every account, which I mean, I'm not going to say that I would be surprised if I heard people still not running MFA. I don't know if that still happens. I probably could
Well,
identify a couple people, but
well, Ben, it took us before this summer. I could tell you the minority of our customers were running MF, were not running MF, or were running MFA. We basically didn't get into very high compliance, and I call very high compliance in the 70% to about July of this year.
yeah.
Most of our small to medium businesses did not want to deal with having, it was too cumbersome to grab a phone and authenticate or get a code. They wasted too much time in their day-to-day operations. That was their motto for not using it. And we finally just said, you know what, this is a Microsoft thing. They're forcing us to turn it on, which they kind of were for admins, not for users, but we just kind of forced it on them. And right now, I imagine we're like in the high 90% of compliancy with MFA. So coming from the 20 to 30% to the high 90s is a big win.
But did you use any of the reports or anything that SaaS Alerts provides to help you make your case, or did you just say, you know what, flip the switch, everybody's getting it?
You know what? Flip the switch. Everyone's getting it.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, there's a report that I love. I always call it my MFA report. It's the risk report. It's just a picture of this of the globe, right? And it shows you all the different red dots of all the failed login attempts and account locks on a specific tenant's environment. And I use that as ammunition to say, can we enable this today? It's only a matter of time before your password is guessed.
I have that map. I have the reports map. I have in a dedicated part of one of my monitors, just seeing the map and how they're popping up and seeing the patterns, how they'll show up in different countries and then go away. So yeah, that's one of my favorite views there that we use on a day to day.
That's awesome. Yeah, we do. We need some sort of like dashboard or something that just you never have to sign in. It just stays up there, and it's like those little cyber maps that you just see it blip blip blip.
Because
So
we obviously get the tickets in our
yeah,
PSA from SaaS Alerts, but there's nothing like having little graphical maps. So I just go click on the red dot. Sometimes I have to zoom in, and there's 10, 20 in one area, but you get to see the users and what's going on. So that gives us a quick view to kind of sometimes we'll even reach out to the customer and let them know, hey, FYI, is your password very strong because they're trying to break into your account. Then we've had the ones that after they broke into their account and response stopped them, they're like, but I had just put the most secure password I ever had. And I'm like, well, you might want to rethink your more secure password you've ever had because it was just breached. So
was it
yeah,
like summer 2024 exclamation point or something?
favorite vacation, I guess.
That actually brings up a good point. One of the things Microsoft recommends is you disable password expiration for user accounts because what's been found with user behavior is the more you ask them to change their password, the less secure those passwords become.
Interesting.
So it's better to disable user password expiration and let them set a strong password and enforce MFA on their account.
Microsoft set us up to fail with that one. We had been pushing strong passwords, change every 90-day kind of scenario. And
Mhm.
all of a sudden we wake up to read Microsoft recommends don't change your password, put it to not expire and use
Yes.
a stronger password. And it makes sense. But when we were just preaching to the choir about it and how they have to change it every 90 days, and all of a sudden we turn around and tell them, you know what, guys, on second thought, let's not change it. Let's just make it a little stronger. So they set us up for failure on that one. But at the end of the day, the posture is the correct one.
That's what I had always heard was change rotate your passwords. Well, Jason, is that something that we can push out with Fortify?
Unfortunately, the ability for us to disable that setting isn't available to us yet.
Okay.
So it has to be done manually. Um, so we do automate as many recommended actions as we can, but we can only do the ones we have support for.
Well, and I saw there's one that's prevent people from using like banned passwords or something like that. I've seen
Yeah,
that in
we do
that.
have that one where you can enable custom band passwords. That's in the password policy and Entra. And we do pull a list of the most, I think it's 100 or so common passwords that are used, and we drop those into the custom band password list automatically.
Okay. Well, and speaking of automation and conditional access policies, uh, do you want to tell the people about the conditional access policy that you kind of created that kind of lives and breathes in the environment?
Sure. So we introduced a dynamic conditional access policy. And by dynamic, what I mean is it's a policy that we update nightly if you apply that recommended action. Now, this isn't a Microsoft recommended action. This is one of our custom Fortify recommended actions. So what this policy does is blocks known bad IP addresses, and those known bad IP addresses are come from our platform where we detect malicious attempts from bad actors hitting all of our organizations and partners. We tally that list up on a nightly basis. Then we'll take that list, if you have that policy or that recommended action applied, we go ahead and create the IP named locations for all of those IP addresses in your organization. And then we use those IP named locations with all those known bad IP addresses to include them to be blocked in the dynamic bad actor IP address conditional access policy that we have. And that will get updated every night in those organizations you have it applied to. And those bad IP addresses are the last known bad IP addresses for the past 30 days.
That's cool.
And
Yeah.
I
I,
imagine, sorry, Ben, that's a
no.
compilation of IP addresses you're seeing throughout all your customers' environments.
Yep, sure is. And as our user base grows, that so does our our intel about malicious behavior too, and lets us identify like behavior coming from different IPs. I love that Jason came up with that it should expire after 30 days, because the one thing that just kind of drives me nuts about blacklists is that as soon as you're on one, there's really no getting off of them. And it's by the time that you end up one of those IP addresses, the bad guy's already moved on. He's somewhere else, and he's long gone from that IP address. So I love that it's as short-lived because they are bouncing around constantly.
Yeah, our goal is to hopefully introduce more of these dynamic type of recommended actions that operate and work from real-time data that we're seeing out in the world, and create more remediations that can be applied that'll use that data.
I always like to compare it to like maybe like intrusion prevention systems and firewalls. You get that subscription. That's what you pay all that money for, to know what these bad IP addresses and bad domain names are, where they're coming from. But with
Yeah,
SaaS Alerts,
Respond
it's
is
doing
great
that.
at taking care of something that it sees happen. With
Hmm.
Fortify, we're really trying to put up a perimeter outside of that because we want to block them before they even get to your front yard,
That's
um,
right.
so they're not knocking on your door. So doing
Yes.
that with these policies, these security settings, really just prevents people from getting into your environment in the first place.
Yep.
Queuing you
Totally.
up, Ben, for the next one, Unify, and how all this can be enhanced with Unify.
Yeah. I love that. So Unify, yeah, that's one of my favorite features for, people that are running RMMs that we support, and soon it will be, I think it'll just be straight Entra devices that we'll be able to ingest. But basically, when somebody signs in, what device are they coming from? Is it one that we've never seen before? Or is it one that, maybe Bob went on vacation, he took his laptop, all of a sudden he's signing in from Mexico or Canada, but it is from a device that we are aware of, and that's just having that information has been proven to be very valuable, especially for our team. It's tracking down every single outside approved location sign in can be a pain in the butt if you're just working with one MSP, but a couple hundred, it gets even louder.
You should
So,
just work with one MSP, Ben.
okay. Nice plug. See, I was wondering where you came up with the name for your MSP, and that's what it was, huh? I
No, but
love
that
that.
the roadmap or future capabilities of tying into Unify, is my assumption correct? Where if you see me, Enrique, logging in from Russia, you never see me logging in from Russia, but I'm in my MacBook, which is registered to Entra ID. What would you determine there to say, okay, either someone stole Enrique's MacBook and credentials, or it might be Enrique in Russia?
Exactly. Yeah, it's more like, what's the probability of Enrique being kidnapped and his laptop being stolen and shipped across the seas? Probably not as great as, and then you look on the other side of that. So if I'm seeing a sign in from Russia and I've never seen that device before, it doesn't exist in Entra or anything, then that's probably something that we would want to take an action on. So, but yeah, that's just one of the many metrics that we can use, one of the indicators of compromise that we can compile into Enrique's favorite module, which is respond.
Yeah. How about Defender and EDR capabilities
Oh,
that
yes.
we've been testing in beta?
Yeah, that actually brings me to my next slide of, and this is, I apologize if everybody was enjoying the nice dark screen, but these are all of the different integrations that we do have across our platform. You see a bunch of RMMs in there. We're also seeing Microsoft Defender for endpoints, so we're ingesting those events as well. And what our goal is to be able to have respond for all of these. So we may not always be able to take an action inside of one of these products, but say I see a sign in that you're using on a Ninja One or Datto RMM, and it's not one that I've ever seen before. Well, I can take certain actions to prevent, hey, I'm going to lock down your account, maybe sign you out, maybe make you re-authenticate. But really our goal is just to add more products here and just get more visibility. And let's see here. Oh, what are all the partners saying about us? Well, they love us. We're pretty great. Um, but
You are.
I want to jump back to one thing. I want to ask, I forgot to ask Jason. Jason, what is your favorite module in SaaS Alerts?
Well, obviously it's going to be fortified because that's where I spend 24/7 in. So yeah, I'm a firm believer in fortified. Like I said, I prefer to prevent people from even getting access into the environment, especially conditional access policies and all the other settings that if we can stop someone from even getting to your front gate, that's what we want to do. Speaking of those managed devices, if you are requiring users to register their device with Entra,
Oh yeah.
then you would definitely want to go ahead and apply the recommended action we have for only allowing sign-ins from managed devices. And it'll automatically prevent anyone from signing in that's not a registered device. So again, you're stopping someone before they could at the point of sign-in. So yeah, that's a firm believer in conditional access policies and properly managing those. And
I
I
just
always
Fortify let you do it. And like, if you have 10, 20 organizations, you can maintain the same settings and conditional access policies across all of them with a few clicks.
I just had to change my Apple MDM because they had a bug and they weren't registering my Macs as registered and compliant and Entra. So that was causing me to have to authenticate constantly because I wasn't on a trusted device and my conditional access policies are the ones you just mentioned. So I had just basically said, it's been a couple of weeks. There's no progress on this. I'm switching MDMs because it's a nightmare. It was a nightmare to switch MDMs as well, but at least now I
oh
don't
yeah.
have to authenticate 20 times a day.
Yep.
Yeah, and for
I've been there.
partners that are using Intune MDM, Fortify does support the remediations that are recommended by the Security Center for Intune. So we do automate some of those compliance and configuration policies in Intune. Um, so yeah, you can gain a lot of points from applying those as well. We do have some more coming towards Intune and some future updates as well.
Well, awesome. Well, as long as we're talking about future updates, is there anything that Jason that you can tell us today that we're planning to do with Fortify in the future?
Yeah, the next biggest feature we're coming out with is what we're going to call Fortify 2.0. So we're going to let you take snapshots. So let's say you have an Azure tenant out there you use for testing, or you consider it your golden template tenant. You have all your conditional access policies built out that you want to have in every other of your organization's tenants. You have, let's say you have custom authentication strengths you have created and you're using those inside your conditional access policies. You have defined your own set of country IP named locations, again, that you are using within those conditional access policies, and you want to be able to mirror those policies across all your organizations. So what we're going to allow you to do is take a snapshot of that tenant, and taking that snapshot will gather all the information from those conditional access policies, save them, and then you can make modifications to any of the parameters after you snapshot them. So there's two types of parameters that you can set. You can set the parameters that are global. So if you say you have a group that you want to exclude or a named location you want to include, you can go ahead and configure that in a global parameters for that snapshot. If you have a group that you have common across all of your organizations, let's say you have a specific exclusion or inclusion for a group name finance, and you include that group name into the parameter for an exclusion or exclusion, so long as that group exists within that tenant, when you go to apply that snapshot, it will go ahead and use that group in the inclusion and exclusion. We might offer the ability to automatically create those missing groups, so you can standardize your tenants across the board. So that's one of the big features we have coming up is the snapshots, and the snapshots won't just initially they'll be allowing you to snapshot your conditional access policies from your golden tenant, but we will also be supporting any of your Intune configuration and compliance policies, so you can snapshot those to replay those across any of your tenants. Any kind of retention policies or data compliance policies. So we'll be supporting a bunch of different areas where you can set up everything you want it to be in your golden tenant, snapshot it, and then go ahead and apply those snapshots to one or all of your organizations and customize them to some degree.
That's pretty awesome.
That's a great enhancement. It'll save us a lot of time.
I was going to say, Enrique, you gonna be able to use that one?
Oh, in a heartbeat. Well,
So
I
yeah,
think
and part of that 2.0 is we'll also calculate drift. So drift on that snapshot, and so we'll have reporting on that. So if you do apply a snapshot to an organization, and somebody goes in and modifies one of the policies that were applied from that snapshot, we'll go ahead and we'll detect that when we're doing our own compliance scan. We'll see that there's something that's out of scope or not quite lining up with how it was when initially applied, then that'll get recorded, and then you'll actually lose points, our version of points for that snapshot compliance because it will have drifted away from its initial configuration.
yeah,
That's pretty
we
cool.
we monitor all our policies through an RPA platform, and we have managed SaaS alerts by Ben and Company. So here and there, they'll get an occasional email asking, did they modify these policies? It turns out it wasn't them, but yeah, that's a very strong tool to have to be able to monitor those. Because obviously, when a bad actor will break in, if they get that far in, they'll start modifying all these types of things.
Yeah, I always like to consider it, like think of it as like, a castle. You have your different defense, you have your gate and you have to get past that gate, but once they do, that's where kind of SaaS alerts kicks in. But I think conditional access policy, they kind of stay outside of that gate. They're the guards making sure that the people are supposed to get in. But people occasionally sneak by them. Jason, as far as with this improvement for Fortify and conditional access policy, is there any reason that the MSP would have to be inside of the tenant after we start managing it, or is that going to be 100% managed from within our platform?
Obviously, they'll be making their settings and configurations and defining their policies inside their golden tenant.
Hmm.
So they would be inside of that tenant to kind of set their baseline.
Hmm.
And once they snapshot that baseline, there's no need for them to log into any of their target tenants when they go to apply that snapshot. That'll all be automated.
Wow.
Now, what happens when there's additional policies or different things? Do we have to go back to the golden tenant, readjust or realign
So
there and
yeah,
export? Or
so what you can do is you can make changes to your golden tenant or make updates or add policies, and then you can just take a new snapshot. And then you can change the snapshot to the latest version, and then you can go ahead and apply that snapshot. And you'll have the option when you remove the existing snapshot of being applied to the org to remove the existing settings and policies that was applied to that and replace them with a new snapshot.
great
Very well.
stuff.
Yeah, it's exciting. Well, cool. Well, guys, coming up on the end of the hour, and just wanted to bring up a couple of next steps. We are going to put a poll out here if you would like us to follow up. Well, not us, but one of our account reps to follow up with you guys and provide you
They
more
could
information.
they can follow up with me. It's
Oh, yeah.
so one thing we haven't talked about, Ben,
Yeah.
managed SaaS alerts. What is managed SaaS alerts?
That's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. So for the MSPs that are interested in this protection, but maybe either they don't have the resources or just don't have the time to dedicate to setting up our platform or applying and keeping track of their clients' secure scores, we do offer a managed service which allows our team to come in there, configure your environment for you, and then proceed to monitor for you 24/7, 365. And we look for emerging threats. We create rules and apply those to your tenant automatically. We also work with you to increase your client secure score, both through the things that we talked about as far as the alternative mitigation, as well as the applying of different security controls. It's a very, very, I'm going to say slow process. It's methodical. There you go. And because we never want to apply anything that would cause Enrique to have a bad day. And when he gets those calls, that's a bad day. So,
That
uh,
might be. That might be one of the best modules we have, or one of the best services. I don't know. It's fighting there with Respond because we now have managed SaaS alerts. So when we have a whole company going to Cancun for a convention, and we have to request to whitelist Mexico for the whole company, all we do is open up a ticket with managed SaaS alerts, and you guys take care of it, and then you guys make sure it expires on the return date. So that's awesome.
Yep. And yeah, and in the future we'll be able to automate that process. But yeah, Enrique is right. So as whenever somebody leaves, we're able to kind of keep an eye on that and might make sure that they're still signing in from where they're supposed to, even if it's from Cancun. I'm still waiting for my invite, but you know,
Yeah,
I'll get it eventually.
we all
So
are.
but yeah, we our team keeps an eye on the logs and follows up with you and makes those configuration and customization adjustments so that you don't have to. We always basically tell our partners that just think of us as another one of your employees. The only job that we have is keeping an eye on SaaS alerts for you, and we don't sleep and we don't take breaks, and we're there just to kind of keep you safe.
And you make your log Microsoft logs because they're not SaaS alert logs. You pull it in from Microsoft, but you make them understandable. They're in English, not in a whole bunch of gibberish stuff that sometimes we can't make sense of. So when we get a ticket for managed SaaS alerts, it really enhances the capabilities that SaaS alerts has with what they're ingesting from Microsoft. So that is a beauty. We're able to know, okay, now we understand what's going on in plain English.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of reports, one of the features we'll have out in Boardify soon is for any of these custom or conditional access policy recommended actions. If you're unsure what it will do when applying it, when you go ahead and apply that recommended action, there's a parameter you can set to put it in report only mode. But also, you'll have a link directly in that recommended action, which will bring you to a custom report that we have that really makes it easy to see if you look at that report for the past day or 2 days, and you have that conditional access policy set to report only mode when it gets created. Just a bird's eye view of exactly who it's going to affect. You don't have to go digging around in Entra and looking through the security logs there and switching tabs and columns to see which conditional access policy was applied, did not apply, enabled, disabled, etc. It'll just be a real clean, easy way to see, okay, if I do turn this on, who am I going to get yelled at by because it was enabled? So that's another feature coming up real soon.
Awesome.
I'm learning stuff I didn't even know about. That's really cool. I'm thinking of background. What's managed SaaS going to have to do with this one? But no, but that it sounds like you guys are making our system very, very easy to understand, very easy to use, and that's great.
Yeah, like I said, currently we have about 130-ish security actions, recommended actions automated that you can apply into the organization. Obviously, some of those are based upon what license you have, but we're up to around 130, and we're adding additional support for other recommended actions weekly.
Very nice. Awesome. Well, cool guys. Well, I guess I can give you 8 minutes of your day back, but I really appreciate everybody joining and Jason, Enrique, it's been a pleasure talking to you guys. And I learned new things today, so that's even better.
We learn every day. It's been a pleasure to be on here, and I do invite all uh, colleagues, MSP colleagues out there to let our customers know Microsoft Secure Score is not just a number. At the end of the day, it's a picture of an overview of how secure their environment is. So they need to take that number seriously, and we need to help them understand why and how. And with tools like Fortify, it makes our life a lot simpler to help them. So let's making sure we shut down or try to minimize these bad actors' capabilities of paralyzing our lives.
Amen to that. Could have been said better myself. Jason, anything you want to say before we wrap up?
No, like I said, we're constantly making updates and reviewing what Microsoft's putting out. So we're trying to stay ahead of them slightly as best we can. But yeah, Fortify 2.0 will be out probably end of next quarter. Is what we're shooting for. So we'll have a bunch of additional functionality. Beyond that, maybe we'll start looking at automations for Defender for Cloud for any partners who have organizations who are utilizing resource consumption inside of Azure.
That's awesome. I'm excited about that. Oh, well, thanks everybody for joining, and we definitely look forward to hearing from you guys, and hope you guys have a good rest of your week.
Likewise, and happy holidays to everyone.
Oh, yes. Happy holidays, guys. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.